And then I want to come back to the original purpose for our doing this, really. The deep state, I'm going to call it that, the deep state. I mean Robert Mercer. I mean Elon Musk. I mean Peter Thiel. I mean Charles Koch. I mean the oligarchs behind the Trump administration who are directing Donald Trump like he was a puppet. And he's a great puppet. Every now and then he does something stupid even in that regard, but mostly he's a puppet. They are now realizing that this effort to get at China through these different proxy wars, to stop China's inexorable movement, inexorable gain of power to the point where they are very soon, if not already, the most powerful economic entity in the world, which is what counts in this world. Their effort has failed. It has failed categorically on both active fronts, the one in Central Europe and the one in Southwest Asia. It's failed for different reasons in both places, but it has failed. What the hell do they do now? Because they're going to become increasingly desperate. They have allied themselves in many respects with Bibi Netanyahu and his greater Israel effort. What does it mean for that? Particularly, what does it mean when, for example, Erdogan gets off his dead ass and finally picks a side? And there's no question in my mind what that side is going to be. It's going to be the side opposed to Israel and opposed to the empire. And it's going to be traumatic. And it's going to be decisive in that particular region of the world. But what does all of that mean? I think it means that we're looking very, very straightforwardly, those of us who understand what's happening, into a global conflict. We're looking at the opening days of a global conflict. We're looking at the stupid, leaden-headed, idiotic leaders like we looked at in 1914, or pick your occasion. We're looking at these people having brought us into this conflict with the ultimate goal, the ulterior motive of defeating China, or at least stopping her in her tracks with her incredible initiative to shift commerce basically from the maritime regime to the continental or the land regime, or at least significantly enough to benefit China majorly and her partners and allies, and to the detriment of those people in the world opposing it and who have the navies to oppose it. And that's Europe and the United States, mostly the United States. I don't know where that, incidentally, I'm still trying to figure out where South America turns out in that, and to a certain extent, Canada too, because they're not with us fully in this effort to do what we're doing. Maybe Argentina is, but I don't see any other South American state that's fully with us. I don't even see one whose leadership understands what I'm talking about. So here we are on the verge of a global conflict that has every indication it could go nuclear at any moment and at many different points. We're losing. They're winning, they being principally China, but China has probably 60% of the world on its side, at least figuratively, if not actually, but I think it's increasingly becoming actually. And the world is sitting here staring at it and not even understanding what the dimensions of this coming conflict are and how much it is going to affect their lives, how detrimental it's going to be to their lives. It's going to make the Morocco issue that you were just talking about insignificant, and many of these other issues insignificant too, because this is going to be a titanic struggle, and one in which I don't think we have a prayer in hell of triumphing in. So what do you do when you're licked and you have to go home with your tail between your legs and you're one of the leading nuclear powers in the world? This is what worries me. This is what concerns me. And it should concern every citizen of the world, but particularly of the American empire and all the states that still are hooked to it, like Japan, Korea, and so forth. I know that's a very dismal projection, but I think we're missing, in many respects, we're missing the forest for the trees, and the forest is ablaze.
I think bringing the conflict, how the conflict is expanding itself in the West Asia. Look at Saudi Arabia attacking Yemen, attacking Iraq, and you have Zelensky and Netanyahu going to Washington, talking with Donald Trump. Both of them, their survival is at risk right now. They want to stay in their position, and the continuation of the war going to benefit them, both of them. For the case of Zelensky, it seems, I don't know if you saw his latest interview on Fox News. He basically says he's willing to merge the two wars.
Yeah.
Coming into the war with Iran, I would say Benjamin Netanyahu would be more than happy if Zelensky does that, and the United States somehow accepting the plan on the part of Ukrainians, because that means that Israel going to stay aside, and the war going to be, the United States and Ukraine against Iran and Russia. Somehow, it seems that in their mind going to be this way, because they're they're so comfortable with what's going on. The United States.
Yeah, you're making my point. You're making my point graphically. This is going to be the maritime powers versus the continental powers, and the continental powers are going to crush the maritime powers. I mean, that's too simplistic, but that's essentially what we're looking at. We're looking at the continental powers now encompassing not just Russia alone or China alone. Good Lord, that's enough. Russia's the biggest country in the world, and China comes close. So I'm not talking about population. I'm talking about geography. I'm talking about extent, And now we've got Iran in there, which is not a small a potato either. Big as Western Europe, diverse, lots of resources. If it were well taken care of, it could be a very, very powerful country. Now they're all together. And Turkey is going to throw its lot in, Nima. I'm telling you, it's going to throw its lot in, and it's going to be with that group and not with the maritime group. Now, friends at Naval War College in Newport probably detest me because I'm saying that, the world of Athens is going away. The world of Sparta is on the rise. It's not a very good analogy or a metaphor because very different societies and such, but it is an apt analogy if you want to look at sea power versus land power. And people forget, who was one of the greatest sea powers in the world at the time we are looking at in the Mediterranean? Persia. The Persians tried. Storms and winds and a really rough sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and Greek opposition stopped them. But nonetheless, they had quite a bit of sea power too. It just got thwarted in the particular circumstances in which it was used. It could have gone the other way. But this is a colossal battle between those led by the United States who've grown accustomed to this maritime environment for so long, and China, who've decided, and her allies who've decided to change it. And strangely, Russia's in both environments. Look at what they're doing to blockade Odessa. They're using their naval forces. And people who tell me Russia doesn't have any naval experience or sea experience or blue water experience, they say that about China too, are just smoking something. I mean, they have plenty of experience. China has the largest deep sea fishing fleet in the world, over 6,000 vessels, huge vessels that stay at sea sometimes for 2 years and keep everything in refrigeration and then come back and offload it. As a matter of fact, they're disrupting the fish species and krill and shrimp and other things around the world considerably. But that said, they have lots of blue ocean experience. So it's not like they aren't with a maritime element, both Russia and China. And for that matter, Iran, though Donald Trump keeps saying over and over again, I've sunk their Navy, I've sunk their Navy, I've sunk their Navy. I see a lot of ships floating around Iran right now that belong to Iran. Nonetheless, this is a battle, a historic battle between maritime power, and land power is winning.
Carl, the economy of the new data shows that the economy of Saudi Arabia has shrunk by 4.8%. It's huge. Even it didn't happen during the COVID-19 and during those difficult days. But right now that's happening. And you see the attacks, the way they're expanding their conflict, two fronts right now. And they're talking about land invasion of Yemen. They want to do something,
tried that before.
Yemen to defeat them.
They tried that before. They got rebuffed. I mean, Saudi Arabia is in a real pickle right now. I just did an interview for the BBC. Interestingly, they taught me quite a bit during that interview. They were interviewing me because I was sort of in the government at the period of time they were looking at. And the period of time they were looking at was 9/11. And they were looking at Saudi complicity in 9/11. One of the statements I made in that interview was that, yes, the Saudi royals were involved in 9/11. I also said Saudi Arabia is the greatest state sponsor of terrorism on the face of the earth, not Iran, Saudi Arabia. Well, I learned a lot from that interview because the young lady who was in charge of the documentary they were making had done her research. And she revealed to me some of the things about what Saudi Arabia had done during and before 9/11. So my attitude towards Saudi Arabia was still one of some disgust, if not thinking them one of the most despicable countries in the world. Are they getting their comeuppance now, finally? Because it is very, very clear to me that they have still operated on the same sheet of music they were operating on with regard to the Mujahideen and Taliban, and with regard to Al-Qaeda and blessing it and funding it, and with regard to other terrorist groups around the world. So it's about time Saudi Arabia got its comeuppance, and I think I'm looking at that comeuppance being delivered right now, first of all by the Houthis, but also by the texture and design of this U.S. campaign against Iran. It's aiding and abetting the destruction of not only the GCC states on the Gulf, but also that one that is most removed from it, that's squeezed in, if you will, between the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf. I don't think Bibi Netanyahu's idea that this is all going to survive and that the Abraham Accords and everything's going to be all wonderful and Israel will be the tool in the middle that engineers all that, I think that's a farce right now. I think it's all a wash in what Trump has done, ostensibly for Israel, but he is expediting, speeding up, accelerating the destruction of the Jewish state in the Levant. Now, that's not the big thing that's happening. The big thing is this struggle between the East and the West, if you will. But it's all part of the same fabric right now. And as I've said, the danger here, and I think, just to get back to Saudi Arabia for a minute, I think it's gone. I think just like Israel is gone, I think Saudi Arabia is gone. At least it's gone as the state that it's been for the last, since FDR and the king met. And Israel's gone as a Jewish state. So we're changing lots with this incredibly incompetent leader we have in Washington, but he's being forced into some of the defeat by these inexorable forces that are clashing right now on the world scene. And they're clashing on a front, Nima, that runs all the way, as I've said many times, it's almost 8,000 kilometers from the Arctic Circle all the way down to where we have our ships, 1,000 nautical miles, I'm told, still, our carriers, our capital ships in the Indian Ocean. And that's another indicator that this is not a maritime world anymore, because these carriers are afraid to go any closer because they'll be sunk. They'll be destroyed. That's a real comment, because this is the instrument most noted in the world of the American empire's ability to bring military power into your backyard tomorrow morning. this instrument that was made, famous around the world by these little wars we've conducted from their platforms, is gone. It is no longer a symbol of American power worth chump change. It just remains for a couple of them to be sunk to prove that dramatically and decisively. But that is an indicator of how the American empire has walked itself into a defeat that is not just like Afghanistan and Iraq and Somalia and Libya and a host of other little wars were. This is fundamental. This is a defeat of the empire, a massive defeat of the empire. And these symbols are going to go with that defeat.